This is PNC Roundtable.
Hello, this is Ric DeVore, Regional President for PNC Bank, and thank you for listening to PNC Roundtable. It's on this show that we tackle some of the region's tough issues with people who make a difference.
Now here's the PNC Roundtable.
Welcome in to PNC Roundtable. I'm Paul W. Smith, along with my co-host Ric DeVore. Ric is Regional President, Detroit and Southeast Michigan, PNC Bank. Always good to be with you, Ric, because you always bring with you interesting guests that matter, that make a difference in Michigan.
Well, I'm sure that today's guest is going to be very interesting. Obviously, being new to the region, I'm sure he has some interesting perspective coming in from California the last several years. So I'm really looking forward to the show, Paul.
How are things at PNC Bank, by the way?
Doing well. Right now, we're 141% of plan.
What?
141%.
141% of plan. What, are you going to take the rest of the year off?
That'd be nice, but I don't think so. But no, we're doing well.
Wow.
Things are great at PNC right now.
You know, the trouble with that is his bosses, and everyone's got bosses. No matter, here he is the president, the regional president, Detroit and Southeast Michigan. Of course, he has bosses, and they have bosses, and those bosses have bosses. But what they're going to do now is, instead of saying, attaboy, attaboy, 141% of plan, they're going to say, oh, I guess we made the plan too low. That's what's wrong with business today. Give you guys the kudos you deserve. Sean, come on. You know that, right? Ric? All right, I'm glad I got that off my chest. And our guest, Paul Krutko, is brand new to the area and going, what am I doing? What did I say yes to? Why am I here? You're here, Paul, because you're the president and CEO of Arbor SPARK. And it has been very, very successful. Before you, I'm sure it'll be even more successful with you. You've been in the job
4 weeks.
4 weeks. Well, welcome. And you were where in California?
San Jose.
Well, as you can see, the weather here is way better than in San Jose, California. And the room went dead silent. Why don't you tell people who don't know what Arbor SPARK is?
Okay, I can do that for you, Paul. Arbor SPARK is a public-private partnership that was formed about 5 years ago. It includes the business sector, like Ric and his company, but also the University of Michigan and all the local governments in Washtenaw County.
And you were drawn to Ann Arbor, which I think would be, if you were to take a Californian and say, what area of Michigan would you be drawn to? Ann Arbor probably would be, in my opinion, as a compliment, number one.
Well, I think that's true, though I have to, there's a little bit of truth and disclosure here. I grew up in northern Ohio and spent the last 16 years out of Ohio. But I knew what I was getting into in terms of weather and conditions when I got back here.
Yeah, but I make jokes about the weather. Look, there's not many places you can live where you can have 3 seasons in 3 days.
Absolutely.
And that's the beauty of Michigan. And I live here for that. That's why I live here for that. And so your first month, in terms of what your expectations were, knowing what you were getting into, et cetera, how's it all played out?
It's gone very well. The thing that's been most striking to me is that the partnership with the University of Michigan and the technologies and new company formations that the university is spurring are very, very exciting. So I've had a chance to see a lot of that initially. I've met with a lot of companies already, and I feel really good about where we are right now.
Well, what about these early stage companies in Ann Arbor, in Southeast Michigan? What do you think are the most important issues facing the startups coming in with fresh eyes as you are, Paul Krutko?
Well, I think the difference between Silicon Valley, where I worked for the last 9 years, and Ann Arbor and Southeast Michigan, is the companies tend to be more companies, new companies, that are making things. And I think that's really important. Out in the Valley, you have a lot of people who are doing things like iPhone apps or software or things like that, not tangible. And you can do that in a cubicle in an office building. But here, people are making real products that they're trying to sell to the rest of the world. And that requires a different kind of support from an organization like Arbor SPARK.
I would wonder, Ric, if that means for you as a banker trying to help entrepreneurs and companies, if it's easier because of exactly what Paul is saying, that they make things here. You can see them, you can feel them, as opposed to an app or something that's intangible. Is it easier for you to get behind these startups and these companies because of that?
I think it is, because there's actually many times hard assets. We have found over the years, Paul, we're not particularly good at finishing software programs and things like that we've taken as collateral. So, the fact that there's actually a device or something they're building is definitely, from a banker's lens, much better. Just to echo something Paul was saying, I think a lot of people in the region don't realize that University of Michigan, I believe, attracts more research dollars than any public university in the country.
Wow.
And many times we take things for granted, but we have quite a jewel there. And with that said, I would agree with what Paul said, because you have this unique partnership between the engineering community, the healthcare community, and the university, and it's really a great model.
Yeah, it is, and it has worked. And Ann Arbor SPARK has worked for quite some time.
That's true, Paul. It's been around for about 5 years. One of the things that attracted me was that Governor Snyder was the initial chair of Ann Arbor SPARK. He pulled together the community to create it. He hired Mike Finney, who's now running the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, to be the first CEO. So I'm succeeding Mike in that role. But what was exciting about that was that they proceeded to look at economic development from a different lens. And that lens is that companies don't worry about boundaries between communities. Their customers, who they sell to, the people who work for them, move across the region. And Ann Arbor SPARK is really an attempt to get past the parochial divisions between this city and that city as we try to compete globally with others who are working in that way.
Paul Krutko, our guest on PNC Roundtable, with our co-host Ric DeVore, Regional President, Detroit and Southeast Michigan PNC Bank. Paul is the President and CEO of Ann Arbor SPARK, that nonprofit organization driving force in establishing the Ann Arbor region as a destination for business expansion, retention, and location by identifying and meeting the needs of business at every stage, from startups to large organizations. And so, Paul, beyond capital, which is obvious, what other types of support do you find the entrepreneurs need?
Well, one of the unique parts of Ann Arbor SPARK is that we provide almost the soup to nuts types of services and assistance to entrepreneurs. What you find a lot of times is someone has a great idea, but they've never run a business. And we need to, in that way, what we need to do many times is pair them with others who have experience in running businesses, who can take that idea, help them commercialize it, and begin to put that product out. So we really provide a lot of hands-on assistance, marrying people with the right services and support that they need to advance their business.
What is Ann Arbor SPARK's boot camp for entrepreneurs? I've heard about it, but don't know what it is.
Well, it's been held now. I just last week attended the 19th iteration of it. What it actually is that people who get their company idea to a certain level are brought into a 2-day intensive session where they are matched with mentors, as well as what we call drill sergeants, who help them take and build their business plan into a form that they can then talk to someone like Ric or a venture capitalist about getting financing to move their idea forward. So it's a very intensive session in which those who make it out of it, some people don't make it out of it like a normal boot camp. There is a washout, but those who stick through it come out of it with a plan that then they can then move to the next step in their business.
And what do you do about what has been referred to as the talent problem, to make sure that talent is available? And that might be something, Ric DeVore, you can address as well as Paul Krutko.
Well, it's the same issue we're seeing in a lot of places, and in fact, the governor, if you think about it, has addressed it by taking a number of very talented people like Mike Finney and moved them up to Lansing. And I think it's a similar issue here. Not only do many times companies have great ideas but not a business plan to go behind it, but they also don't have the individuals to execute it. We all know entrepreneurs are great and creative, but you also need some folks to run the shop. And I think Paul's firm, in addition to other things they do, also marries people up with individuals.
That's right, Paul. One of the innovative things that SPARK does do is it has a talent portal, and what we do is we look. It's not matching every job to every job. We're not looking to match someone who works in a restaurant with a restaurant job. This is a portal that is at very high level. Managers, executive level, people who have knowledge-based skills we look to put them into a system where the jobs that companies are desperately trying to fill can be matched with the people who can fill them. But the other thing that I think we're going to need to work on over time is the reason that Silicon Valley is successful, one of the reasons, is that people who are very talented know they're not going to work for one corporation for their entire life. They're going to have a serial career, move through a number of different firms. And what we need to do is build enough of that kind of cluster around Ann Arbor so the talent says, you know, I can come out of the University of Michigan, I can take a job with a particular company, that company gets acquired by someone else, and I can continue my career in another company or with a startup. It's very interesting to me that almost everybody I encounter in Ann Arbor sort of dates the economy from when Pfizer closed in Ann Arbor. But what's interesting to me is to see how many of those people, I'll call them graduates from Pfizer, who have now gone on and started new companies, are working in new fields because they loved the region, they were committed to the region, they weren't going to relocate, and they were going to try to build new companies here. And we see them all over in a variety of lines of businesses. So it's interesting how a big company's pullout can actually spur entrepreneurial activity when the right kinds of services and tools are there in financing for those people to start new businesses.
Yeah, a great example is Dr. Roger Newton, who's on the board of Spark, was at Pfizer and was one of the co-inventors of Lipitor. So he's probably the poster child for this in a way when you think
He
about
actually formed a new company and is now in one of our incubators developing new drugs. Again, because he didn't want to relocate his family and was committed to a lot of his workforce to take them with him to try to build a new company.
We talked about, you brought up already University of Michigan. Of course, we've got Michigan State University and Wayne State and Eastern, Western, Central, and you could name many more. We're pretty blessed with our universities and our community colleges as well within the sound of my voice. But to grow businesses in Ann Arbor and Southeast Michigan, education is an important part of the equation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And for you as well, Rick, for what you're doing and what you see, that it is an important aspect of the equation on various levels.
And I think you can see maybe a smaller example of that partnership right out your window with Detroit Henry Ford Hospital, Wayne State, getting together and partnering on many things, and also with DMC. So, I mean, I think it's on a smaller scale, but this formula has worked very successfully. Our headquarters city, Pittsburgh, is University of Pittsburgh with Carnegie Mellon, with the hospitals and the technology companies. So there seems to be a good recipe for this formula.
Yeah, and we've got all the ingredients. We just have to put them together the best we can.
Yeah, the key thing, too, though, is to recognize how important quality of life is in terms of a variety of things. Creative people want to be able to do creative things after work. They want to live in a place where they can have access to good recreational amenities and all of that. There's a statistic out, Paul, that I've really paid attention to, that there's been some survey work that looked at graduates in innovative knowledge types of degrees, and 65% of them choose where to live first before who to work for. That's a recent statistic.
That's astounding to me.
And so when we were kids,
I don't know about for you guys, it never occurred to me when I was looking for jobs and work and all of that.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, when I graduated from the University of Cincinnati in 1979, it was where I could get a job, right? And then I went there. But what's interesting is because the new graduates, this new generation doesn't perceive themselves as getting a job in corporate America, if we want to play that sort of language, they see themselves as their own company, that they're going to have this serial career. That's why it's so important, and that's why I think Ann Arbor has a leg up, because it is such an attractive place with high quality of life that people will want to relocate there because they can see the opportunity to be in a new company or to start be a part of a startup. But also that's a place where they can see themselves having a very high quality of life and raising their children as they move through their lifetime.
It's funny, when you said that, it made me think of the first time I realized that some places were better places to be regardless of what business you were in. And the first place, and this is 25 years ago was Lake Tahoe. And I walked around, I was doing broadcasting, some things there, and I walked around and said, you know, it really doesn't matter what you do here. At the end of the day, it's a pretty nice place to be. It didn't change anything, though, in my decision-making. I was offered a job in San Francisco, which is a pretty nice place to be, but I didn't go there for a variety of reasons. And it's interesting that now, today, that statistic that you used, Paul, is, to me, a really high statistic that people are looking at that first. Quality of life, the place to be, and then the job or the company. Tell us about the Accelerate Michigan Innovation Business Plan competition, because this will grab some people's attention.
Well, this is a program in which we actually remember I said in terms of the boot camp, people develop their business plan that they are going to then try to pitch to get financing. This is actually a competition among companies with their business plans. It's judged. People come in and do their pitches, and there's $1 million worth of prize money. $500,000 goes to the winning company. Or early stage startup type of entity. So it's really exciting because what happens is you see the best of the new ideas, new business plans, new business models coming and actually being judged and competing, and follow on after that. These companies then are the ones that are likely to move forward and have success. So it's really an opportunity to showcase in Michigan all the exciting things that are happening here.
And with $1 million or up to $1 million in prize money, that's
gets your attention.
It gets everybody's attention. Explain again what they have to do or how they can become a part of that, or maybe even if it's just where they get information.
Well, really, they can just contact us at Spark, and we can put them into the right, in contact with the right people if they are able to participate. I think right now the competition is pretty well set in terms of those who have submitted business plans, and we're working through the judging process as we speak. But this is an annual event, Paul, and we would certainly, anybody who has got an idea that wants to move forward in a future year and would like to be in this competition, this opportunity will be open to them in the future.
And it's spark.com or
Ann
Arbor SPARK.com?
It's
AnnArborUSA.org is our web address.
Ann Arbor USA.
Yes, .org.
.org. AnnArborUSA.org. All right. And I'm hearing, I keep my ear to the ground, which, by the way, is painful.
Yeah, you do.
It's very painful, but I do keep my ear to the ground for reasons just like this. I've heard word on the street that you'll be joining Spark's executive board.
A week from today, and the 23rd. And
congratulations on that. And obviously you're doing that because it's important to it's significant to you and it's significant to PNC.
It really is a big issue with PNC. As you know, Paul, we've really tried to increase our brand awareness in Ann Arbor, and we all know that while sports are a big thing, there's a lot more to Ann Arbor than just sports, and so we've tried to partner also with University Music Society. And Ann Arbor SPARK is really, I think, the beacon of small business, and really we thought if we can do all those things, i.e. be in the university, do the music, and then also be involved with Spark, we really have covered the market, if you will.
Well, you've done that in many ways since you've been here at PNC, and you've included your involvement in the community in so many ways. I personally know about your involvement with our Paul W. Smith Golf Classic to benefit Think to Try PAL coming up August 15th. We appreciate your support in that. And by the way, you can go to paulwsmithgolf.com for more information. And you've more than hit the ground running and been so very involved. And that's so important these days in banking. It's hugely important in your competitive field.
It really is, and it's something that, we're really working on brand awareness here. And I think when people find out you have a good moral compass as a firm, it attracts not only business but also potential employees. To Paul's point, I mean, people are choosing employers differently than they did in the past, and we're pretty convinced that if we're close on the dollars, we may win ties with other financial institutions because of our moral compass, if you will.
Good for you. Good for you. And Paul, how important are the collaborations with private and public institutions to spark success? And are you collaborating with other incubators? I think of Automation Alley, for example, or TechTown.
Well, Paul, the collaboration is probably, if you were going to describe, use one word to describe what Arbor SPARK does, it is collaboration. In its origins, it defined itself as open source economic development, and what that meant is we will work with anybody and everybody to advance the region's economic success. So one of the things that's very interesting in Michigan is that the way the various incubators have been organized, they tend to have a specialty in a particular area. So Automation Alley is very strong ties to the automobile industry, and in particular in trying to spur exports from this region. TechTown is really focused on trying to create entrepreneurial opportunities right in the city of Detroit. Arbor SPARK has played a role where we have actually ran the Michigan pre-seed program for the entire state. So we actually see projects from all over the state of Michigan because our staff is adept at working with those kinds of companies. What that tells you is each of us may have a particular strength, and in collaborating, we don't duplicate or reinvent the wheel in every community. We actually collaborate and use each other's strengths where appropriate. So if I've got a company that's really looking to think about its export opportunities in Europe, instead of me trying to figure out how to do that with them, we make that referral to Automation Alley, and Automation Alley helps them. At the boot camp that we just talked about, Automation Alley doesn't have that entrepreneurial acceleration support. They actually sent 2 teams to Ann Arbor for the 2 days for them to get the services they need. So this regional collaboration among the organizations that are trying to foster economic development is very, very important. And it really allows us to maximize our resources without duplicating each other.
Well, it's been a good time for SPARK. 5 years to have the guy who's now our governor involved from the beginning, to have Mike Finney, who was there before you, who's now doing MEDC, and now to have you there. It's an excellent time. And SPARK is frequently, as you might guess, held up as an example of change and innovation by the governor. And I'm wondering, Paul, if you could share some of the key tips business leaders can use to help them adapt and grow from your own experience and from Ann Arbor SPARK's experience. And obviously, Rick, you can jump in on this as well.
Well, again, I think that the one thing that was attractive as I considered this opportunity was the fact that of the governor's involvement, of the fact that many of the team members from SPARK went to the state. That creates a good awareness of what we're trying to do and makes it easier to work together. So I saw that as a real plus. I think I'd take it back to the whole notion of collaboration on a regional basis. I think what you're going to see coming out of the state is the almost seeding of the same similar ideas that we've been working on at SPARK at a regional, local level on a statewide level. So the talent portal that I described, interestingly enough, the state of Michigan licensed that software that runs that from SPARK and are now rolling that out across the entire state. Mike Finney and the MEDC team is now talking to the rest of the state about how they can work as regions to market the state. The other one that's really very interesting is this whole Michigan campaign, which is going and
the Pure Michigan.
No, this is called it's Pure Michigan, but this is called Mich Again, and it is an attempt to reach out to alumni of the state who have been successful elsewhere. I mean, to some extent, Rick's an example of that, right? So he was in Pittsburgh and came back here. Right. I'm sort of kind of close. I was in Northern Ohio and came back, but this idea is that as we go out, we may find very receptive, friendly faces as we go around the country because of the huge number of alumni from the University of Michigan, the other universities that you mentioned that know what the state's about and may really want to come back. They've made their mark someplace else, and making them aware that things are turning around and there are many new opportunities in the state of Michigan. This campaign actually goes to those cities, holds events, almost like an alumni function for a university, but it's really designed to encourage people to know about the new opportunities and maybe think about coming back to Michigan to be a part of this renaissance.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Monroe, Michigan. I only left because I needed to for work and went to the East Coast in New York City and for a number of years in Philadelphia. And then I came back, chose to come back 15, 16 years ago. And it's interesting. I hadn't thought about it this way, but there are a lot of us that if given the opportunity, choose to come back. So that Mich again is a great concept and a great idea. What was it like for you, though, Paul Krutko, running economic and downtown development efforts in Jacksonville, Florida, and Cleveland, Ohio? You know, you're looking at some pretty different areas, from Jacksonville, Florida, to Cleveland, Ohio, to Ann Arbor, Michigan, where you are now with Arbor SPARK.
Well, even if you, and then you insert in that I was in Silicon Valley for 9 years. So, yeah, I've had a very, very varied career in terms of what I've experienced. I've gone from this region, which others call sort of the Rust Belt region, to Jacksonville, which is essentially a southern booster city. You know, why do they have an NFL franchise? Why did they have a Super Bowl? Because there's real community involvement in advancing that community in terms of the political leadership, the business leadership. You see that a lot even in the NBA playoffs right now. You see Memphis and Oklahoma City as cities that are advancing themselves, and it has a lot to do with that civic involvement. So I learned a lot about that there. And then the last 9 years in Silicon Valley was just a complete, almost MBA education in entrepreneurship, startups, and then actually dealing with very, very large corporations in San Jose. My three biggest are well-known names. Cisco Systems had 19,000 employees. eBay started 11 years ago in one of the incubators that I then began to manage there, and became a worldwide e-commerce platform. And Adobe is in 3 towers, 18-story towers in downtown San Jose. So I got the full spectrum from those mature technology companies that are worldwide platforms in their different space, Cisco's and networking, Adobe and documents, eBay and e-commerce, to we were advancing life science companies, environmental companies at early stages. So I've really had a varied career around the country, and I think it really prepares me well to work in Ann Arbor, because it's got a lot of those elements. Ann Arbor SPARK is really desire of the community to come together to advance a common agenda. We have high technology coming out of the university, but then there is still the old line industries that I have been involved with in the past in Cleveland, and how to move them through new technology to be successful in global competition.
Ric, how do we, we've talked about Grand Rapids a number of times. It's like another part of the world.
Right.
And frankly, Ann Arbor is like another part of the world. How do we get the spark from Ann Arbor to catch on a little closer to home, and for us to bridge that gap?
Well, I think a lot of best practices probably can be replicated. You think about University of Michigan's, I think, number 1 or number 2 in terms of active alumni, and if you marry that with how many engineers are in this region. I mean, if you just draw a radius around Ann Arbor, it's incredible, and then you get that awareness out. I think that's what we need to do in some other regions. I mean, I think Wayne and Michigan State have very active alumni associations, but I think, to the point Paul was saying, we have a lot of alumni throughout the country that don't know, or are a little bit rusty at what we have to offer here. Mm-hmm. And that's really, I think, what we need to do.
Maybe still thinking of it as the Rust Belt,
right,
even though we know that's not the case, and that the technology in the automotive industry can run neck and neck with Silicon Valley, because we've got a lot of computers in those cars.
Well, and again, Paul, the thing that just a couple other numbers to share with you that I discovered in a head-to-head comparison between technology companies between Silicon Valley and here, the wage rates here are 30% less than Silicon Valley, and the real estate occupancy costs are 40% less. That means that certain companies who are looking to grow, we don't have to worry about giving them an incentive. There's already an incentive just in the underlying cost of doing their business. We need to get that. We need to get that word out. And it's not that the quality of life is less. It's just that the cost structure is here much, much cheaper than that narrow strip of land between 2 mountains in California, where people just, you can't buy a house, you can't hire people. There's just tremendous competition. So I think we have some advantages that we really can sell. And you mentioned the Pure Michigan campaign. I think that is going to be very helpful too, reminding people what a beautiful place this is to live, to work, and to play.
Luckily, thankfully, it was short-lived, but there was a period of time when people were saying, you can come to Michigan and it's like buying property and companies in a third world country, and yet it isn't. And I thought, no, that may not be the best selling point. But the fact of the matter is, sadly, you can get some tremendous bargains in the great state of Michigan now, and we need to play up our advantages, and one of the advantages is it really is cost-effective to move here.
That's true. Though I would also say there are other places in the country that have that similar advantage. So again, we're in a competition, and that's why working as a region is the intelligent way to go forward, because our competition isn't between Oakland County and Washtenaw County.
Right.
It's between this region and Shanghai. It's between this region and Sao Paulo, Brazil. That's our competition. And so that's why this notion of regional working together is so positive and is the way forward for the future.
Paul Krutko, President and CEO of Ann Arbor SPARK. Go to AnnArborUSA.org, AnnArborUSA.org for more information. And the final word from our co-host, Ric DeVore, Regional President, Detroit and Southeast Michigan, PNC Bank.
I'd like to echo what Paul was just saying. A lot of times people just think of our competition as Ohio or Indiana as we compete to bring business here. But to your point, I think you need to think worldwide, and this is not going away. And so when we're thinking about, I've had many people say, well, you know, Michigan is a beautiful state, and vis-a-vis, say, Indiana or Ohio. Well, but you might be competing with somebody in Brazil. And to your point, so I really think we need to think differently in that regard.
Yeah, because we need to work together. That's where our strength is, and understanding that it isn't these little areas, it's these huge regions internationally. And frankly, if we work together, nobody can top us.
No.
It's just a fact. We sometimes have to remind ourselves of that, and we like to remind you of that too here on PNC Roundtable. We're glad that you were smart enough to tune in to WJR.com and elsewhere to hear our conversations every month. Again, our guest, Paul Krutko, President and CEO of Ann Arbor SPARK. Go to AnnArborUSA.org. And, of course, our co-host, Ric DeVore, Regional President, Detroit and Southeast Michigan, PNC Bank. As for me, I'll be talking to you at 760 on the AM dial, Monday through Friday from 5:30 till 9. Regards, Paul W. Smith.